Welcome to episode 1230 of the Multifamily Collective. Tonight, let's talk about moving the planet. So I lead with that because I literally just read a story about moving the planet from one solar system to another. Instead of building a spaceship, scientists are proposing that we just move the entire planet. And it would take, at the speed of light, approximately 4 years to do that, but that might be a more efficient way to escape some catastrophic event that may come our way someday. I only lead with that because it is to catch your attention. Right? I just am blown away by that. I might even link the story up just for fun. But tonight, what I really wanted to talk about was turnover in the multifamily space, especially in the positions of maintenance, which is no shock to anyone, and leasing positions. I've been in this business for roughly 30 years. It's 27, I think, at last count, but coming up on 30 years. And over those 2.5 plus decades, I have made observation, have been in the direct hiring role for maintenance team members and for leasing consultants. This concern that we are all going through right now has been a concern for 30 years. It's probably been a concern for even longer than that. Now, the difference, I believe, is that we're seeing that churn or that turnover rate increase, but it's not new. And I was listening to a podcast today, and someone was opining about the fact that, or the idea that this was a culture issue, that multifamily had a culture issue or an issue. Companies, property management companies, individual property management companies have culture concerns. They're not focused on culture. And I take issue with that because I worked for, let's say, 2 different organizations that really worked on culture. Culture was number one. And I could probably cite off the top of my head several different organizations that have property management companies that have incredible cultures. You see it all over LinkedIn. Let's say in advance of 1 million plus units under management, plus minus, in a handful of companies. If you just looked at the NMHC top 50 and you went down the list, my imagination tells me that people in the industry would choose some of those names, let's call them brand names, at least brand names, to people who work in the multifamily industry, household names. They would or could, because they've either worked there and or know somebody that works there currently or has worked there in the past, that would suggest that culture is front and center to all of those organizations. So I take issue with the remark, or sort of the general remark that was made on the podcast today, that company cultures are at a deficit, or the attention to company culture is at a deficit. I don't think that's true. And I don't think that you can correlate, you can't one-to-one correlate that culture is the reason why we have this turnover issue with maintenance technicians and with leasing consultants. I can't get there because I think that people do focus on the culture issue. So I don't know what the answer is. Look, because it's been an issue for 30 years, I think in the leasing positions have always been a stepping stone to the next thing, right? It's that person who is going to college and they work in a leasing consultant position because they are using that as a springboard for something else. And so you sort of have this built-in turnover or churn that happens in that position. I think maintenance technicians, it's no secret that the work is not sexy. And it doesn't, in my head, it doesn't matter how amazingly over the top your culture is. Some of the assets that our team members are tasked with taking care of, some of the resident bases that they take care of are just incredibly tough. They're hard, and it's hard work. And many times it's thankless work from the consumer perspective. Even if our on-site team members and our corporate cultures are supportive of one another, and there's this sort of great combined culture that exists that is incredibly supportive in nature, when you're getting beat up every day from a customer because the property's just old, or the property has some systemic issues with plumbing or windows or roofs, and the capital is not there to really restore or fix these things, you create these scenarios where people just get burnt out. And that's innate in the maintenance technician position. There's just burnout and people turn over. And I think even if you get creative about the way you do labor distribution, and you move people around, and you get people doing different tasks and different things throughout the day or throughout the week or throughout the month, it's still the same work over time. I do think I'm very encouraged about this idea or concept, and people are doing this today or moving toward this. I'm not so sure how sustainable it will be over time. I think that we'll figure this out. I really do. But moving toward a more pointy model, meaning that people are laser focused on the thing they are best at. Let's use HVAC equipment as an example. If you find somebody that's just very good at HVAC systems, be it the condensing units in the wintertime or the internal unit in the wintertime, and you just keep them busy doing that work because they're really good at it, or they are fulfilled by it, then that is potentially a recipe to avoid the turnover. And you pay appropriately for that, right? If you farm that stuff out, you're going to pay a pretty incredible or steep price for that. So maybe the answer is to pay up for that pointy position. And then you sort of divide labor. You start to tear apart some of the processes and systems and routines and disciplines that we have set in place for a long bit of time. You tear those apart into little pointy pieces of work. And then you do your labor distribution against those little pointy pieces of work. And then maybe we get this turnover thing headed a different direction. I think the longer range answer is that there has to be high design and workflow design built into multifamily buildings and structures in the future that lend to not so much recurring rote and routine type work that is associated with mechanics that break down, right? When those products get better with technology, when the mechanics get better with technology such that, friction and things like that don't wear them down, I think that is a moment in time where you start to see the labor issue just start to peel itself back. In the meantime, I think this is a hybrid model of insourcing, outsourcing, getting pointy about the work, and understanding that you are just going to have turnover in some of those positions, and you just have to be ahead of the curve in terms of sourcing, hiring, teaching, training, turning, sourcing, hiring, teaching, training, turning. It's just this. And the answer to those properties that are at a deficit right now is that you've got to get way out ahead of the hiring curve, and you just hire in advance. You overhire, knowing that those positions and those opportunities are going to present themselves because the stats tell us that they do. I think that's probably the near-term answer to this thing. But to end cap, I just refuse. I reject the idea that there are not companies out there that are focused on culture and creating wonderful and amazing cultures. There are probably more than 10, if not 20, 25, 30 different examples that we could come up with where companies are building just incredible cultures. I worked for some of them, so I know that to be true. All right, take care. This is the longest episode I've ever had. It's not a Daily Minute thing. I clearly had to get that off of my chest. Take care. We'll talk to you again soon.